To tell us more about the situation in Syria, I'm joined from Washington by Webster Tarpley, author and historian. Welcome to the programme, sir. Dr. Tarpley, first of all, Syria has agreed to a peace plan by Kofi Annan, but how much does it correspond to the crisis in Syria?
Well, the problem with the peace plan is that it fails to recognize that the origin of the problem are these foreign death squads, NATO-backed death squads that have been introduced into the country over the last year or more. And of course, they have gathered a certain amount of indigenous population, people with various grievances against the regime. But therefore, we can't imagine that there's anybody to negotiate with, and this I think is the problem. Who can Assad actually negotiate with? Now, looming ominously behind all of this is what's coming on Sunday. Is this conference of the so-called Friends of Syria, this time in Istanbul, after the failure of the one in Tunisia. They're now attempting it for a second time, and they're trying to make sure that this one doesn't fail in the way that the previous one did. We're reading all about this in the columns of Al-Akhbar of Beirut. What is planned is this buffer zone, in other words, that the Turkish armed forces or gendarmerie will seize a part of northern Syria and make that into a safe haven for these death squads so that they can regroup and continue their attacks into Syria. You look at this Istanbul conference. On the surface, it looks like a coalition of the willing, as we had in the previous decade, 10 years ago, to attack Iraq. This one looks more and more like the Munich conference of September 1938, the one with Hitler, Mussolini, Chamberlain, and Daladier. In those days, the goal was to carve Czechoslovakia. Today, it's Syria. In those days, the buffer zone was called the Sudetenland. Today, it's called the northern area around Idlib. Russia was not invited to that one. Russia will not be invited to this one. In the meantime, there's a chorus of... yes?
Let's go ahead, Doctor.
The people in Turkey are now very unhappy with Erdogan. I think Prime Minister Erdogan is very much on the hot seat because of his very, very bungling administration of this crisis. According to the Turkish press, Erdogan had been conned by Obama, in effect. Erdogan had been told by Obama in those phone calls that we hear so much about, right, that Obama is constantly on the phone to Erdogan. Obama had convinced Erdogan that the Syrian government of Assad, the Ba'ath Party, was about to fall, and that several months ago. Now, that has not happened. There's a growing awareness in the Turkish parties, in the CHP party, and also in other parties, that Assad is not about to fall. And therefore, Erdogan has crawled all the way out on a limb as a result of this foolish decision. We've also got Devlet Bahçe of the Nationalist Party, one of the main opposition parties, has pointed again to that meeting of Obama with Erdogan in South Korea in the last day or two, when Erdogan said that he agrees 100% on Syria with Obama. That's very ominous. And what Mr. Bahçe points to is that there's a secret plan now for the occupation of Syria and the dismemberment of it, including the creation of a Kurdish entity, as he calls it, a Peshmerga, in the northern part of Syria, which is going to be a tremendous problem for Turkey then, because by now you've got a kind of independent Kurdish entity in northern Iraq. If you add that one in Syria, those might begin to coalesce. That will then pose the question of the breakup of the Turkish state. And Erdogan is the one who has gotten Turkey into this fix.
Indeed, and Doctor, let's talk about the opposition. It's creating obstacles in the way of reforms taken up by the Assad administration, reforms that the US itself has contradictingly described as a good step forward in the way for peace in Syria. Now, couple that with the very same foreign-backed opposition in Turkey, which you spoke about. The opposition is struggling to form an interim government in case the ongoing regime change, succeeds in its efforts. Do you expect these efforts to succeed, the fact of regime change?
No, I don't think so, because this so-called Syrian National Council is, of course, a bad joke. They have a split. They have a schism every week. They have been called upon to accept the Kofi Annan plan, and all the imperialists want them to accept it, and they refuse to accept it. They won't even give lip service to the idea of negotiating with Assad. They say that that's too late. Now, at a deeper level, what the Syrian government is asking for, and I think quite correctly so, is what assurances are there that if the Syrian government declares a ceasefire, that these death squads and their supporters will also stop shooting? There are no such assurances. The second thing is, if you're going to pacify the situation, what assurance is there that the armed rebels, terrorists really, inside Syria, are going to allow themselves to be disarmed and then turn around and take part in the campaign for parliamentary elections, which are currently scheduled for the 7th of May? No assurance of that either. When Hillary Clinton today says that the Syrian army has got to get out of these cities, this is completely one-sided. This is this Orwellian approach that the West has had to this, simply ignoring the fact that there are death squads on the ground and that NATO put them there.
Indeed. All right, we'll have to end it there. Many thanks to Webster Griffin Tarpley, author and historian from Washington. Thanks for your time there, Doctor.